Welcome back, everyone. This is the Hit Mix Show, Top Hits, Classic Dance Tracks, and I've got a special guest on with me. Just before I do that, I just want to say one thing. I remember when I was in the big multinational companies, I was a national manager and state manager, and I used to travel all around New South Wales listening. Well, I tried to listen to a bit of music, but I got a bit sick of it. But I also tuned into Talkback Radio. And there was two people I always listened to. One of them was Mr. John Laws, and the other one was Mike Jeffries. And I used to always loved Mike because of the way he used to roast everybody on air. He was fantastic. Welcome to the microphone, Michael.
Good morning, Dom. Did I do that? Did I roast people on air?
Well, you're good at it.
Surely not me.
You were good at it. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you for that. But, I was different then. I'm just a mellow individual now who tries to fit in.
That's not what YouTube and all the other stations, all the things I've been reading up on is telling me. I want to know a little bit about Mike Jeffries, the start of Mike Jeffries, where it all happened.
Oh, what? You mean first job in this business?
Oh, no, take me back. Tell me about yourself. I want to know about Michael.
Okay. Well, I left school at 15, not my idea. But the old man didn't want me to go to school anymore. I had a variety of jobs. And then I thought I'll try out for radio because I didn't I didn't hear radio until I was maybe 14 or 15. I lived on a farm, and the old man, apart from being a farmer, and he'd need the battery that ran the radio to put in a tractor, so the radio would be off for ages.
You remember that too, do you?
I do remember that. Or
crystal sets?
Well, almost. I wish I'd had one of those. But then the Prime Minister of the day would say something that would send the old man into a fit of rage. He was a bit tense. He only had two emotions, anger and suppressed anger. And if the Prime Minister of the day said something he didn't like, the radio would go off and I wouldn't hear it again. So I started to hear it, I was about 14 or 15. Do you remember those clock radios with an analog front? I
remember them all, mate. I'm probably older than you.
Really? That's hard to believe. But anyway, so I thought, I could do that. And I got a job. I went to a fellow named Bryson Taylor.
I remember the name.
And Bryson said to me, "You'll never get a job in the ABC, old soldier, not with those vowels. But you've got a nice warm voice and you might get a job at a country radio station." So I got a job at 2LT Lithgow, mainly, I think, because I terrified the manager. I went in doing these sort of full-on, when I'm working here... And I think the manager thought, oh, God, I better give it to that one. Otherwise, he might be back. So I did that. I worked at a number of country stations. I went to Newcastle for a while. Had a good time there. That was when I first started doing the aggressive call-in show. And things were so different then. I mean, back then, I said this to Paul Murray on Sky one time, my callers were mainly university students trying to get the best of me. I was like 22 or something at the time. But nowadays, of course, what would happen is they would try to cancel my sponsors, so I would be off the air. That kind of debate, I think, is pretty much gone. But anyway, I did that, and I've always been a bit of a polarizing influence, Dom. We used to put on shows for the high schools, right? That the kids had charged 20 cents to come and see us. And when I went out on stage, half the group would cheer and the other half would boo. And I always thought that's just the way it is. So, a few years ago, and I noticed people getting terribly distraught because somebody said something unkind about them on social media, I thought, well, if you're going to stick your head up above the castle walls, that's what you get. Anyway, so I did that and got some criticism. The Newcastle Morning Herald said, some of our radio announcers think they're tin gods. Who does Mike Jeffries think he is? But, of course, that all added. And then I did a TV show. A real old-fashioned TV show. Young people today do not get the opportunity to do that. It was, real old-fashioned with a monologue to begin and a band and guests. And
I'm that age, mate. I remember it all.
cute animals, and you never really knew what people were going to say. For example, I used to have these cute animals on. We had a little lion cub. on. And it was so lovable with its big paws and everything else, and people thought it was wonderful. And then a few weeks later, I had the same lady back from the same place, and I said, "Oh, everybody loved the lion cub. How is it?" And she said, "Its mother ate it." And I thought, perhaps you could have thought about that before you went.
So when was that, and what station was that on?
I was on 2HD and 2KO twice.
Right.
This is in the 70s. I went to Sydney in the mid-70s, right? But
flared trousers, gold chains, and marijuana sticks, eh?
Pretty much. Although I did go down to Melbourne briefly at that time. I noticed Melbourne people were more sort of flared trousers and whatever than Sydney people, but I know what you mean. But that was the era for it. But I thought the 70s were pretty good, actually, because, well, the money wasn't bad, right? And costs hadn't started to go through the roof, you know. I think young people today really do have it tough.
In the 70s, the music was simple. It was like you were either a hard rocker or a disco freak, or you're Cat Stevens or Bob Dylan. I mean, that's it. That's what it was all about in those days. And never the twain shall meet. When
I was about 17 or 18, I was talking to a young woman, and she said, "What do you think of Bob Dylan?" I said, "Oh, not much." I said, I'm more a Rolling Stones man. And she said, "Oh, but he's so deliciously angry." And the look on her face, I thought, maybe I should investigate Bob Dylan a bit more.
Oh, I don't know. And tell me, now some of the stations you meet at has been amazing. So many of them you've worked at.
Well, I've been at some more than once. I don't know how many times I've been at 2UE. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I've been at some good stations and some stations that weren't too sure where they were going. But actually, one of the best stations I was at was 3XY in Melbourne in its heyday. 3XY rocks Melbourne. And
Mike Jeffries.
All of that.
Remember it well.
It was, you talk about the marijuana thing. We were having a ratings party one night, and I was talking to the guy that did 10 to midnight. And I said, "Are you going on the air tonight, mate?" He said, "Yeah, I wouldn't want to waste this high." So, I mean, that was the 80s, I guess. And
it certainly was, mate.
Yeah. So I had a good time there. I worked at the ABC twice. Yes, you name it, Dave.
Did a Sky News too?
Yes, I was doing Sky News there for a while, and they still ring me up occasionally, but I haven't done anything for a while.
There was a couple of times I saw you there. There was one about the Queensland situation there, and that was an interesting talk.
Yeah, what was that about?
Well, you know what? I'm not going to. I can't exactly, but you were querying about something about the voting and how it was in Queensland.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I think Paul Murray was on and a few of the others were on at the time.
Yes, that'd probably be right. I think I'm seen as just sort of a handy person, you know, because I did a program there one night, and the guest hadn't shown up for the next program. And the program director said, "Oh, Mike can talk about anything. Do you want to do the next program as well?" "Yeah, okay, good, right."
Now, you know, you're going to probably tell me to push the dump button now, but the John Laws and Mike Jeffries together,
yeah.
How true is it? Do you want to answer any of those questions? Did you get on?
No, not at all. Not at all. Although...
This is Michael all over.
No, we didn't. Well, see, the thing with John is he is a bit inclined to run to teacher and say, "He started it, he hit back," right? So John would have a go at me at night, and I would have a go at him. And, you know, it worked out so well for both of us.
Oh, ratings went through the roof, I remember.
For both of us.
Yeah.
That was the best ratings he ever had, and I was on at night, and I had really good ratings. And but that sort of didn't sink in to John. John very much wanted me to go, and eventually he had his way.
It's that voice that gets me all to go.
Yes. Do you remember Ken Sparks?
I sure do.
Yeah, well, Ken was the one who saw me out of the building because the previous guy who'd hired me got sick of it all and left. Bill Gates was his name, but, well, still is. But anyway, Ken was showing me out of the building, and he said, you made a mistake. You shouldn't have answered back to John, because he went to Sir Alexis Albert and said it's him or me. And the manager's got him, Frank Jeffcoat, and Frank said, I didn't like to sack Mike, but John brought in $600,000 a year, and that was the difference between profit and loss for the station. So he had to go. So I went.
But, that's the great thing about yourself, that you're willing to talk about it. I mean, I get sick of when they interview on radio or TV, they ask a question that it's like, they're not allowed to ask. Don't ask that question. No.
But there's too much of that.
It's, no, we're all mates. We all love each other.
And, so what? I mean, all right, I guess some of the things that I've done, people would say, I've been reckless. I know one of my sons thinks of me that way, because I said to him a few years ago, I think I'll buy a Harley, like every other bloke my age who couldn't afford one when he was 19. And my son said, good idea, Dad. Break more bits of yourself. And I thought, you're no fun.
Has Mike Jeffries got many hobbies?
A bit. I work on the community radio station. That's a hobby. Mm-hmm. I'm a target shooter. That's a hobby.
Not of people, but of targets.
Targets, yes, that's right. And so I do that.
That's an interesting hobby.
Do you think so? Yeah,
I think so.
I find it to be a good hobby, because when you're doing it, you can't think of anything else. So that means you forget about everything else in your life, in your day, and so it's very relaxing. But I've had people, particularly women people, say, I don't know why you think it's fun running around with guns. Well, darling, the first thing you do is not run around with guns. Don't be running around with them. That could end badly.
That's right. Listen, one of the biggest questions I want to ask you, now you mightn't answer this either. You've interviewed many people in your life.
That has been the great joy for me in this business, all the interesting people that I've spoken to. Me, a boy from the country who just came to town to see how they do things, and all the people I've spoken to, I'm amazed.
And that's how I think about myself. I say, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing today, and here I am talking to Mike Jeffries.
There you are.
Which is fantastic. So, if I said to you the top 3 people you liked or hated interviewing, who would they be?
Look.
There we go. We've got the laugh. You might back off of this one.
Not really. It's just sort of hard to say. There have been some moments in some interviews that have gone really well. I tell you one that I thought was good, because the first time I spoke to him, it was dull. Remember Dudley Moore?
I do.
Right. So I interviewed Dud, and he was very polite and answered all my questions. It was pretty much, who cares? And then I said to my producers next time he came on, okay, I'm going to get a performance out of this bloke. And whatever it was I said hit a chord, and he was really funny. It was great, right?
And he wasn't stoned or drunk or anything. He was just...
Don't know. Didn't ask. Don't ask. Don't tell, Dom.
Right. Okay.
But there have been a few other moments that I've been pleased with. Kenny Rogers, remember Coward of the County?
Yep, sure do.
First time I heard that, I was driving through Texas, and believe me, that's the place to hear it, the pickup trucks with the shotgun racks and all that. So if you recall, at the Coward of the County, his father said, don't fight, son. But the Galton boys came calling, and there was 3 of them. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And have I got the name right? Galton. That's right, the country and western band, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's Galton. Yeah.
The Galton brothers. Yeah. Anyway, for some reason, that seems strange to me. Anyway, I said to Kenny Rogers, that business about the Galton boys coming, called, there were 3 of them. I said, how did that go down with... whatever his name is, Tom. He said, he was on the phone to me saying, what are you doing to me? And from that moment, you see, we're engaged. Yeah. And the thing is, in our conversation, not marital, but the thing is...
Who knows these days, mate? AC/DC, it's all okay.
But when you interviewed these people, and we used to see them all up at whatever it was place they used to stay up at the Cross, it's kind of a production line. So I don't blame them for getting a bit jaded, that here's another one, here's another individual to ask you questions. So you've got to do something that will get a bit of a performance out of them, I think.
I think what gets me a lot in regards to interviewing now is where they allow them on they do come onto the shows, but then they got, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, you can't talk about something else. So, you feel like saying, what can we talk about?
Well, on that score, to tell me I can't talk about something is just an invitation.
You love it.
Right. But
Mike Jeffries.
I made an exception for Jodie Foster. It was Hinckley's, Hinckley, the guy that shot Reagan.
Yep.
Right. It was the anniversary of his doing it, I think, a couple of days ago.
Who knows if it's true?
And anyway, that was the thing. When you talk to Jodie, don't ask her about Hinckley because he said he did it for Jodie Foster. And so I didn't. I think that's fair enough. It's not her fault that there's some lunatic out there that did what he did. So, but apart from that, don't be saying it's off limits because, hey, let's go there. I agree with it said most recently, you got to go over the line because otherwise, how do you know where the line is?
That's right. I agree. That's what it's all about. I mean, if you're opening yourself up to an interview or opening yourself up, all you can do is says, I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think that's fair enough.
You can say, sorry, but I'm not going to answer that one. What's the next question?
Yes.
I'd rather them say that than not want to know anything at all.
Yeah.
What about a female? What's one of the interesting female interviews you've had?
There's one, I don't know if
I don't like the laugh. The laugh
this is pretty funny, but I don't think I should tell it at this hour of the morning with an old English actress in her original name. Females that I've interviewed. All right, here's one. Reba McEntire, right? I've always admired Reba.
Right.
Country and Western singer, TV star, clever girl, got sick of being ripped off with transporting the show, so bought her own trucking company. Go Reba. Anyway, so I was interviewing Reba, and to tease her a bit, I said, oh, you country singers, you're all the same. Your songs are so gloomy. Daddy died, the tractor broke, and we had to eat dirt for Christmas. And that was all right, okay. But then a week later, I got a card from Reba. Thanks for the interview, Mike, and I'm working on our song. And I thought, geez, you're good. If I had your public relations skills, I'd rule the world.
This is the question for you that I'd love to hear what you're going to give me. I remember asking this of Tim Webster.
Yeah.
Where do you think radio's heading?
I don't think it's heading anywhere good, to be perfectly honest. I think specialized radio has a future. I'll tell you a story here. Back when Dr. Hewson lost the unlosable election, I spent a lot of time talking to
Tell me how much that costs and what percentage?
What, to lose the election?
No, the GST when they asked him the question. Tell me how much that costs and what part of it.
The cake, yeah, he didn't know about the cake. Anyway, I spoke a lot to the shadow minister for communications. Right. And I sent a page and a half of A4 to the Liberal Party, and I said, this is what radio should be about. And they replied, and they said, what you're saying is exactly what the Liberal Party thinks radio should be about. Right? Okay, good. So then I was back and forth to Canberra talking to him. And there's a mate of mine, Holger Brockman. Remember Holger?
I certainly remember Holger Brockman.
All right.
I won't say much about Holger, but I remember him.
Okay. Holger and I, we had an idea for a radio station that wasn't going to have huge ratings, but would appeal to people with money to spend. That was our plan, right? Anyway, so the Liberal Party and also the Labor Party, I spoke to the guy from the Labor Party as well, just to be sure. They said they were going to deregulate the industry and they were going to have what's called spectrum landlords. So if you, Dom, as a spectrum landlord, owned 101.1 to 109.1, and I, Mike, thinking Australia desperately needed the polka music station, I could rent one of those frequencies from you, and then away I'd go. And the Labor guy said the same thing to me in a different way. He said, our view of radio is it's a bit like office space. Even if we think as politicians there's a glut of office space, if you want to put up a building and people want to rent space, that's totally your business. But the quid pro quo, Dom, was that the existing broadcasters would be able to have one more license, right, in each capital city, and they could network more. So when the Labor Party got in, they did the exact opposite of what both sides were promising, and they allowed all this aggregation, all this networking, right? But they didn't allow any new players. So I thought that was a big mistake. And the industry, the big guys, they thought it was terrific for a while because the money rolled in. But you know what, Dom? Radio is such a quirky business. It's hard to find people who can do it. I used to go to the US on a regular basis, and even with their population, they would tell me it's hard to find people who've got the knack, right? Now, when I was young, I'm not saying everything was wonderful, but there were a lot of mainly young dudes who would go to a country radio station, do it for a while, realize they weren't going to be stars, and give it away. So there was all this churning. And out of all that churning, eventually there would come somebody who knew how to do it. Look at Kyle Sandilands, right? The king of Sydney.
Whether you love him or hate him.
The king of Sydney. Look at his background. You know, he plays up the fact that he was a kid on the streets and times were tough and everything. There is nowhere off Broadway anymore for radio announcers to try out. And look at some of the big stations in Sydney, how many morning zoos or groups of people they've tried. One after the other don't work.
And I'll tell you one thing that I will mention. When I was at another state, I'm happy to say it's the 280J 88.1.
Right.
When I was, as you know, a little bit of my background in the club, DJing and whatever, we created this niche, which you said, the dance niche, right?
Yep.
And you probably remember when there was a fight for Wild FM. Do you remember Wild FM, all the Wild CDs that came in? And basically what it was all us guys.
Yeah. I do remember that.
All the club DJs, right?
Yeah.
We got together and we only got a small audience, but the audience used to love it. I mean, they used to just go crazy at 280J. And then we said, well, we got the backing. We got record companies backing this. We got everything. So they said, we got into the Wild FM thing, right? Waiting for the license. Well, as you say, politics comes in, bonks it on the head. Wild never happened. But those top 10 or 11 albums, they're like hen's teeth these days. People can't find them anywhere. They used to love the Wild albums. And this is what you're saying, that it's almost like when there's a good story and something that can happen, the right people up there have got a way to bonk it on the head because it doesn't suit them.
See, it's such fun to appeal to an audience that really, really likes what you're doing instead of being a compromise, right? And so much of media is a compromise. When I first went to Melbourne, used to do the Underground show, which was Iron Butterfly
Jeffries.
and Quicksilver Messenger Service and all the San Francisco bands. And the people who listened to that, they were so into it. It was really good to be able to do that. But so much now, you know, Alan Alda from MASH, right?
Yes.
Nice guy.
Yeah. Well, he seemed a nice guy.
I thought he was. I had, you know, one of those conversations off the air as well as on the air with him. And we were talking about MASH. When MASH first started, it, as we say in the industry, had a lot of trouble finding its audience. But eventually it got a better lead in. People liked it. And of course it became the classic. But he said to me he didn't think MASH would get made today because these programs are designed by committee. So we've got to have something in it for this group and something in it for that group and be careful of this and be careful of that. Although it's worth noting, I was reading today that, you know, Disney has come out with these woke versions of the classics. Apparently it's cost them a lot in terms of share price and revenue.
You know, they almost went broke about 15, 20 years ago. They were just about out of the area.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. The only thing that brought them back into the real world was they conned onto the animation type thing, that making the movies and the animation side of it.
Right.
And that started to get them to grow. And now they're just gigantic. Again.
But they are gigantic.
But I'm telling you, they were almost broke. They were virtually gone.
Yeah. Well, I think Disneyland's getting very expensive. It's a long time since I've been there. One of the things I thought was curious about Disneyland, I took the Space Mountain ride, and there's a big sign saying, "Do not take this ride if you've had a beer lunch." And I thought, I'm surprised at Disney, you know, even acknowledging that as a possibility.
Well, I'm telling you, there's one last question. If you ever listen to my interviews, I always ask.
Yes.
And the question is, imagine that you're sitting in a park And
in a pub?
No, not a pub. No, not a pub. You're thinking too much of beer, Michael.
Yeah.
In a park.
Oh, park.
You're enjoying the sunshine.
Yes.
And I say to you, who would you, for 1 hour, like to interview or get to know, dead or alive, and why?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. There are so many people I've interviewed that I've really enjoyed, but a lot of people okay, I think I'd like to interview Dick Cavett or maybe David Letterman. Those guys, they were interesting. Howard Stern, once upon a time, not now. I mean, Howard, I'm not like that anymore. Oh, shut up, Howard, you hypocrite.
They never change their stripes, mate, I'm telling you.
And I wouldn't mind talking to him, but I think Letterman would still be interesting. Yes, yeah.
So, because some of the answers that come back are amazing. You know, they really go into different corners of things and whatever. But it's just nice to know, if you really had that 1 hour, who would you like to interview and say hello to and know a bit about him?